All right, 206. So this video is going to cover using Logic to create drum beats, right? So we talked about drum beats today. I talked in general about the concept of how drum beats are made, but now I'm going to implement that using the two ways that we talked about. Now again, the two ways that we talked about were either using an instrument to sequence drums with MIDI notes or to use audio files to construct a drum beat, okay? So I'm in Logic here, I have a blank session, and I'm going to add a software instrument, and I'm going to choose Logic's drum machine, which is called Ultrabeat. So I'm going to hit create, and it instantly opens this up, right? Now, a couple of extra things to be careful about here. These are all the drum kits in Logic. There is also something called the drum kit designer, or the drum machine designer, which uses Ultrabeat, but really creates kind of a complex infrastructure for using drums. And for now, I want you to stay away from that thing. I will talk about it shortly, but for now, we're just going to pull up Ultrabeat like this. And then the easiest thing is to go to manual here, go to drum kits, and I can choose any drum kit I want, okay? Now I happen to like this Ghost Town kit. I've actually been using it for years on examples for class. But, so the drum machine, remember, all that it does is take samples of drums and put them on specific notes on the piano, okay? You can see the notes over here, and for every note, there's a different sound. And basically, you access the drum machine or the drum beats, drum notes, by playing these specific notes at a specific time, obviously, right? So instead of this playing like a piano, like we would if we pulled up a piano sample, instead, every note is playing a different type of drum, okay? And so forth. And as I mentioned too, every kit basically assigns the same category of sound to the same notes. So this low C, which is called C1, always is a kick drum, okay? The snares are always on D and E, which are these two notes right here. The hi-hats are always on F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp, and so forth. So every drum kit can be different in terms of the actual sound samples, but the categories of sounds, hi-hats, snares, and kick drums, for instance, are all going to live in the same place inside the drum machine, okay? And that's how I was quickly able to switch to different drum kits and still play my drum beat inside the kit, okay? So, let me just delete this track. So what I'm gonna do now is make a track, okay? And the easiest way to make a track, now again, I could record with the MIDI keyboard, I could do all kinds of different things, but I'm going to hit T for tool palette, grab the pencil, and make a region, right? I'm gonna make this region 4 bars long. Now remember, 4 bars is up to measure 5, right? This is gonna be 4 full measures. So if I'm doing 4/4 time, as I talked about before, we need to use the grid here to assign the notes to the specific places on the grid, all right? And the grid, again, is found at the top here, right? So this is bar 1, beat 1, bar 1, beat 2, bar 2, 1, beat 3, and bar 1, beat 4. Then bar 2, bar 2, beat 2, bar 2, beat 3, bar 2, beat 4, because I'm in 4/4 time. This is measure 3, and so forth. 3, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4, and 4 bars, okay? So my drum, my loop is going to loop this drum, this pattern, as I create it, okay? Now right now I have the looper turned on, which is this little thing at the top, which means that when I hit play, this is just going to play over and over and over, okay? Now, as you know, I can double click on this Ghost Town kit to pull it up down at the bottom, but I have to say, this thing, I don't love this. I always hit Command 4 and open up a new window of the piano roll, okay? And remember too, as I mentioned in class, all your drums are listed on the left, right? So their names are posted here, and it just helps you find where your notes need to go, okay? So I'm going to start entering notes, and as I talked about with your most basic drum beat, we're going to have a kick drum on beat 1, okay? So let me go on here, grab the pencil, go to kick 1, put a note. Here's measure 2, here's measure 3, and here's measure 4, okay? So I now have a kick drum. The next thing I'm going to want to, oh, I'm sorry, I picked the wrong kick drum, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go down, take these down to the bottom, to that kick drum. I'm going to choose a snare, okay? And I'm going to use 2 and 4, right? Because this is beat 2 of measure 1, right? This is beat 4 of measure 1, okay? Beat 2 and beat 4. Now, please be creative with your drum beats. I'm not telling you have to be this way. I just did this as an example in class. You know, change things up and be creative and add some new stuff and do some interesting things, okay? So now I have a kick drum on the downbeats, and I have snares on 2 and 4, right? Pretty basic pattern. I'm going to do my classic fill at the very end by adding an extra note, okay? Maybe I'll do this note instead of that one. And then my last component again is the hi-hats, right? And the hi-hats generally move fairly fast in tempo. And they basically, you know, are fairly quick moving, right? So I'm going to put these on here like this. And if I actually grab the brush tool, I can do this. I have to be careful with that I maintain the line, but I can basically drag hi-hats out across the whole thing. Okay? Now, we had also talked about the idea of open hi-hats versus closed hi-hats, right? Remember, the hi-hats are 2 metal plates that are essentially pushed together, and when I pull them apart, I get the open sound, which allows the sound to ring, sounds like this. And when they're closed, they are pressed together, the 2 plates of metal, and it forces them to not, they can't ring out, right? So you get this sound, this closed sound, okay? So, and well, basically, oops, don't want to do that. What I did was I took my pencil and I add some intermittent here, open hi-hats, okay? Now remember, with hi-hats then, in the traditional sense, you can't have a closed and an open hi-hat at the same time physically, right? Because you have two pieces of metal smashed together, either they're closed or they're open, they can't be both. So that's why you can see that I've removed the closed hi-hat where I have an opened one. All right, so let's listen to this. Maybe put a couple over here. Okay, let's do the opposite of that. Okay, so I've created a 4-bar loop here, okay? And now I'm going to do a little bit of other things to make this interesting. As I mentioned in class, one of the most useful things is to go in here and grab the velocity tool and add some variation to my hi-hat levels, okay? Now another really common thing to do is actually to do this. Have your velocities scale based off of 4 beats, okay? So what I'm going to do now is highest, a little bit lower, and then the lowest. And if I just grab this now, I can copy this. If I put the cursor here, I can paste. Okay, paste. paste, paste, but then I'm going to delete that last note. So listen to how this sounds. So it's giving you a little bit of variation, right, in those drums by having these accents. Oh man, that is not working the way I want at all. It's overlaying the sounds, which I don't want, right? So let me delete all these too. All right, and then delete that. So listen to this again. So you can see there's a slight accent on those downbeats, right, on every beat. Don't be afraid too to change it up. So, you know, I have a 2-bar phrase now. So imagine I want to change this up and do another 4-bar phrase, but I'm going to make it a little bit different, okay? So now I'm opening the second 4-bar phrase. Maybe on the second 4-bar phrase, I add a clap on with the snare, okay? And I also am going to go in here and add some more kick drums. Like this. And I'm basically just making this more complicated, right? And a little bit more interesting. So now I have a variation of this, right? Maybe I'll actually also add a couple extra snares. Now, I've been doing this a long time. I know exactly where these snares can go that'll sound good, but this is how this pattern sounds now. All 8 bars. Okay, so, and maybe too, I can go into this loop, maybe grab the closed hi-hat, move it to a different closed hi-hat for this second set. Okay, so this will give it an even better sound, even more different sound. And I can also do this, I can turn down the velocity of all these notes. All right, so now my second 4-bar phrase is different even more, okay? So anyways, so this is one of your assignments, right? To create a simple drum beat like this, it needs to be 8 to 16 measures long. And I will change that on Google Classroom, I have not yet, okay? So the second part of this assignment is to do something similar, but with audio files, okay? So I'm going to make some new tracks, but this time I'm going to choose audio, and I'm going to make four audio tracks, all right? Hit create, and there they are. So I'm going to mute this first track because these are going to be my new drum tracks. Now I'm going to call this the kick drum. Oops, not cack, kick. The snare, hi-hat 1, and hi-hat 2, okay? So I now need to create another drum beat, but use audio files instead. So I shared today with you a folder, which I believe it's right here, drum samples. And I'm just going to grab these audio files and drag them onto the window, okay? Now, one thing we talked about was changing the tempo, all right? Now, my tempo of my project is up at the top here. It's 120. So imagine I want this to be actually 144. It could be, right? And now it's going to be faster, right? It's going to be considerably faster if I unmute this. In fact, that's a little much, right? This could be 80, right? 80. Enter, not 10. That would be very slow. So there's quite a slower tempo, okay? So maybe this is what I want for my first track, for first beat. But my second beat I want to be faster, okay? And I'm going to put it on the same project. So what I'm going to do is click on this arrow right here, which is the show the global tracks, all right? And one of the things it pulls up here is this tempo. So I can now actually go out here. I'm going to go to measure 10. I'm going to put a note in, go to my pointer, and go to change this to 100 and maybe 104, okay? And now I'm going to have my second drum beat starting there at measure 9 or 10, and it's going to be down here at the bottom using audio files, okay? So let's zoom out. I'm going to move my looper out here. Okay, let's start at measure 11. It makes things a little bit easier. In fact, it doesn't even matter, that can be there. So I'm going to now go back to my audio files, grab a kick drum, okay? And I'm going to drag it up onto the track, okay? So, and now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy this onto beat 1, all right? And so forth. So remember, what you're trying to do is line this up with the grid, right? The grid is showing me, in this case, 16th notes. So it's important that it stays in the tempo or it stays properly spaced out, okay? For your drum beat to sound correct, it needs to be like this, all right? So, and then I'm going to go to my snares, and I'm going to go to my folder again, and I'm going to grab a snare, right? You know, just to change things up, I'm going to actually use a sound. This is kind of a cool sound. Like, this could be my snare drum if I wanted, right? Remember, the second drum beat needs to be something more creative, right? Or something you can change things up, do what you want. I want this to be a really short sound with lots of reverb. So I'm going to select all these and make these really small. And then I'm going to go into my effects and add a reverb to it. Okay? This is way too loud. I'm going to turn this way down. My kick drum too. Because it's going to be clipping here really shortly if I'm not careful. So, and then I need hi-hats, all right? So I would literally go to my folder here, grab a closed hi-hat, drop it down on here. I'm going to shorten this region. I don't know why these are so long. Zoom out, and then copy this, okay? And I can use this over and over and over. I think this is going to sound fine. Okay? So, you know, there's just so many different things I could do to this. Like, for instance, I could put an EQ on here and do some sort of crushing or some sort of filtering. Right? I don't know, some kind of interesting. So I'm just constructing a different drum beat, right? I'm using audio files this time instead. So really important to remember is that you need to separate your different sounds onto different tracks, right? We don't want snares and hi-hats and kick drums on the same tracks because they're different sounds. They need to live on their own track where they get their own EQ treatment and they get their own effects, okay? So obviously I couldn't add a reverb to my snare if I had a bunch of sound on it, right? A bunch of different sounds. So I'm actually gonna go in here too and grab the auto filter, just as I know this is gonna sound interesting. Do some sort of like moving bandpass. We're going to take this rate up to 4 bars. Turn this hi-hat way down. Okay, so now I have something kind of interesting going. You know, I can play around with this. Maybe I duplicate this. Let me delete that. You know, I'm going to do something in here. I'm going to duplicate this track and then actually use Logic's pitch shifter. Drag these down here. So when you get these little tiny audio files like this, it's hard to grab a hold of them sometimes. And on this second track, snare 2, I'm going to add on a pitch shifter. Pitch shifting stereo, I'm going to set my semitones to 2 down. And I'm going to make the mix 100%. Okay? All right, my hi-hats are really bright too. Maybe I'll take these down a little bit. Listen to this. Right? Maybe I can do some cool automation with this. Touch. Grab this filter. Right? And then do something interesting with this. Maybe every bar. Bring this up. Right, so I'm doing some sort of automation here just to try and make this kind of interesting. You know, it would be cool too is to bring this peak up a little more, up like that. Do something else. I don't know. Just got way quiet. Turn it up. Oops, not turn touch on. So anyways, you can see there's so much of different stuff I could do, right? But I've created a little drum beat here. You know, maybe I add some extra kicks on here. Just for variation. It's kind of cool, actually. Kind of like that. Could do something with that. Anyways, so this is the other method, right? And again, as I mentioned in class, it's very common to use both. Right? You may use both. You may use audio files and MIDI tracks when you make a beat, just because that's kind of what's necessary sometimes. And as I mentioned, you know, I tend to use hi-hats, use MIDI for hi-hats, because I get more, you have more control over the velocities of the sounds, and you just have more control in general than you do with repeated audio files like this, right? So it just depends on what you're doing, but you know, finding cool ways to make your track interesting are really you know, kind of effective. I mean, it's you're just trying to make it interesting by doing different things. You know, I could take this whole thing now and duplicate it again. And, you know, maybe on this second pass here, so I just added a reverb bus on here a little bit. You know, the second pass, I'm going to duplicate this track again. And instead of this being the sample, this time it's going to be an actual snare drum, right? So, oops, don't need that. So, or maybe a clap. Let's try a clap. I'm going to put claps on actually on beat 3 of this measure. Okay. Like that. And again, all I'm doing is escalating my second 4-bar phrase, right? So maybe on this track 2, I'm going to take the pitch shifter out, no plugin, take the auto filter out, move the channel EQ up. Maybe we'll take this reverb and change it a little bit. Okay, so now listen to my whole. You know what else I'm going to do is on here I'm going to add in a second hi-hat. So drag this down here. And really common might be to have the hi-hats on the offbeats only. Okay. So let me drag this over and then put it on 2. So instead of it being on 2 and 4, or yeah, 2 and 4, or no, instead of it being on, yeah, I'm doing offbeats 2 and 4, but these are 16th notes. Okay, so it's not actually 2 and 4. Let's hear how this sounds once I get these all out of here. So it takes a lot of copying and pasting, you know, but these are just individual audio files. Too loud. So anyways, I mean, I just made a little variation, right? The second 2-bar phrase has a different hi-hat. Actually, I meant to start these here. So anyways, kind of interesting. It's just something different. But, you know, that snare is kind of a neat effect added in there. So, all right, guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully you find this helpful, and please take a look again at the Daily 10, which is covered by everything in here, okay? So we'll talk about this during the week. Talk to you soon. Bye.